Hi, I'm Mack, and I'm on a mission to see the hurting get healed and the healed go out and heal others, in order for all of us to experience the true love and light we desire. This podcast is me sharing my journey with you, so you don't feel alone in your journey. Welcome to the Golden Rule Revolution. Hello, brothers and sisters, and welcome back to another episode of the Golden Rule Revolution. I am Mack, and today I'm excited to bring to you Johnny King. He is a coach. He's a really beautiful soul. He is a podcast host. He does quite a bit of things, and I was on his podcast right before we started recording on my podcast, and so we referenced that. But this episode surprised me. And how much it touched me while we were recording. And so, Brother Johnny, thank you for coming on, brother. I really appreciate it and honor you. And thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for being vulnerable and opening up. And I know this is going to touch and impact a lot of people. So, my dear brothers and sisters, enjoy. Well, brother, I'm glad we finally connected. And, it's beautiful how they say like attracts like, and here we are finally meeting after we have so many similar friends and acquaintances in common. And here we are getting to create something beautiful together. So thanks for coming on the podcast, brother.
No, thanks for having me. It's going to be fun to get into it. I'm excited to see where this goes.
I had a vision. So my brother's name's John. He goes by Johnny, and Johnny Elsasser, another amazing Johnny. And I'm actually getting the opportunity to be an officiant in a friend's wedding coming up. He goes by John, but I call him Johnny Sax because he was the sax player in my band in college. And I had a vision one night about Johns, that Johnnies are, they're warriors of love. And that every John I know, even if you go to the Bible and like John the Baptist or John that writes the book of Revelation or the books of John, it's about like waking people up to something greater, but it's in a state of warrior language, but cool. Not a warrior of war, but a warrior of love. And so anyway, when you reached out, I'm like, oh, here's another Johnny. Yeah, and I have a lot of Johnnies surrounding me in my life, and it's beautiful. I feel like, man, the world's a better place because of you, brother. So thanks.
Oh, that's great. On, yeah, no, I appreciate it. It's actually my mom. So I've got 4 other siblings, and my two brothers are James and Peter, and we're named, from biblically Peter, John, and James. So that resonates for me too. Yeah,
that's awesome, brother. Yeah, my brother's name's John. And then we had friends, Matthew and Mark, growing up. And so it was Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John.
Yeah, it's perfect.
It's biblical around here.
It is. No, it's good. It's good to chat for sure.
Yeah, man. So share like where you're coaching, you're doing a lot of stuff, performance and helping people, find their path. But tell me about your path growing up, and where'd you grow up, and how'd you land in the beautiful state of Colorado?
Yeah, seriously. No, born in Florida for a couple of years there, and then spent a little time up in the Northeast until we moved when I was like 8 or 9 to the Midwest, which is primarily where I lived the majority of my life. But I definitely, of course, it definitely shaped me in many regards. But I kind of grew up having a traditional, blue collar, Midwestern, childhood. And there was nothing inherently wrong with it. Certainly not compared to your story at all. Just more so my dad was gone, primarily raised by my mom. My older sister had to grow up real fast. I don't think she got much of a childhood because she was my mom's right-hand woman. Female school teachers, female Sunday school teachers, females, just females. And so I think it was just one of those things. But then again, I always really connected to superheroes, and just kind of hyper masculine men Arnold Schwarzenegger and everything else. So I definitely found myself feeling the shame grew in me, I think, because I had no clear sense as to what it meant to be a man, or I had no real confidence in being, a man. I tried to follow as best I could my older brother's footsteps, but he was running blind as well, right? So all of that, all of it was traditional, I guess, if you will, until ultimately my mom passed away from cancer in 2006, which was kind of the first thing in my life that gave me a major hiccup to how I thought life was, because it had gone traditional, pretty typical, and but it was, that was kind of the first brick falling from the wall, if you will. And then ultimately, shortly thereafter, my father came out that he was gay. And then shortly thereafter, the ex-wife wanted a divorce. So it's just kind of within a couple of years, like my whole life got turned upside down. And I kind of started questioning, like, how did I even find myself in this position? Even though everything looked great on the outside. I mean, I think that resonates a lot with what I've read of your story too. It's just like, but then why am I so unhappy with it? So it wasn't really one of my true intentional choosing, which I think a lot of guys can resonate with. Is like, you get into your 30s and 40s, and sometimes you wake up to being like, how did I even get here?
Right.
So that's the short of the long. But that definitely has a lot of bearings on as to why I've coached for over 10 years, why I worked with women for 8 years, why I now work with men over the last several years. So it's definitely been a journey.
That's amazing, brother. So growing up in a Christian home, what role did that play? Like, what bearing did you like? Because the word Christian's like the word blue. There's a zillion different shades of it. It's not like one brand, but how did that shape your worldview as growing up?
I appreciate you asking, because actually I don't know if I've really been asked that question much on podcasts, and but it's definitely shaped my life. I was raised Christian Scientist.
Oh, wow.
Not Scientologist.
Yep, but Christian Scientist. Yeah.
Christian Scientist. So that's why we moved to St. Louis, was to put all of us children into Christian Science school. So it's a private school. But again, you grow up kind of, and it's probably similar to, whatever you grow up with, you kind of grow up thinking that your experience is the only experience, So I grew up really with my faith being, really focusing on faith-based healing. So we never went to doctors, and never used medication. So everything was all metaphysical, prayer-based healing. And that was normal to me, and if you got hurt on the playing field, you got taken off the field. And then we had what we would refer to as Christian Science practitioners start praying for us. And it's very, very interesting now, because I wouldn't say, I guess I would say too, after my mom passed away and my dad came out, like that was the beginning of me kind of drifting from my faith, even though I never really I'd grown up with people saying, oh, you need to make Christian Science your own, right? Or Christianity, make it your own. I'm like, what does that even mean? Like, I do feel like I've just been kind of given that, but I don't know. A lot of it was just going through the motions. So going to Sunday school, going to church, reading the Bible, during breakfast each morning, all the stuff just became, it was very much like not anything I owned, even in my marriage, I should, quote unquote, should have gone to God so much more than I did, and that was not, I just didn't, just something I took for granted, So I think that just in the last 10 years have I really been getting back into my faith, and found a church here in Colorado that I absolutely love. I'm going to different courses and getting into Bible studies, and like, it just feels so good. Because I feel like the work that I'm doing, it's like, it's so heavy of a burden in some regards. I couldn't do it without my faith.
Yeah.
So it's strengthening me as I go. but a lot of times I do kind of question, if I have what it takes. But it's nice to be able to put that burden off on someone else's shoulders and not mine, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it totally does. That's fascinating that I started this podcast then of like Johnnies are like these warriors of God's love. It's like essentially that's how I view you, and just that title. I mean, your name is Johnny King. I mean, sure, people say, "Oh, a cool name," but I mean, there's way more to names. I think I really believe we get to see. Well, I had this. I'll just share full transparency on this.
Yeah.
When I was on a plant medicine journey one night, I saw that we as souls get to see the essentially conveyor belt of the bodies that we will jump into. You get to see all the lines, all the ancestral line back and all the ancestral line forward. And then we get to see when we jump into that body, what will happen to us, but then the ripple effect of all the other lines. Like it's an infinite amount of bodies essentially, but the souls see like, oh, if you jump in here and you heal, or you go through this trauma and you heal, the ripple effect up and down the line and to other people is massive. And so we're all jumping in these bodies saying, okay, that's why no one goes through this life without trauma, because there would be no point of impact. There would be no point of like the hero's journey, being the superhero in your own story.
Well, I grew up too. There's a phrase out of the book that kind of goes hand in hand with the King James version of the Bible and Christian Science. It's called Science and Health. There's a quote that just says that the author and founder of Christian Science said it was like, trials are proofs of God's care. And so I kind of feel like that's exactly why we go through this like preparatory school of human existence. There's got to be a reason why we're going through this, to get us to the next level, and I've been getting into a lot of Dr. Joe Dispenza's stuff, and man, so much of what he says is literally kind of what I grew up with, being like, dude, you raise your frequency of your thought, you get closer to, source. And in that place, you're not even looking for healing.
Right.
You just know that when you're up on that, when you're connected with source, there's no need for healing, because healing would be a lie. The need for a healing would be a lie. You just realize you don't need healing because there's nothing but perfection up there.
Right.
And that's kind of the same premise of where I came from metaphysically. But sometimes it's just hard to be in this human world with all the heaviness and especially with the stuff that we've got going on right now in our world. And it's easy to question faith and God's presence, and if we're not just completely self-destructing, as a species, so
right.
It's tough, but
we're given that opportunity, I think, a lot more frequently, recently anyway, than we want to admit. It's thanks for sharing that, because that every person that I have on this podcast, just people that energetically we all connect. Like I just had a gal on, Alicia Berry, who was raised in a sect of Hinduism, but she is like sprungboard off, found her own. Just everyone comes from a framework, and then it's really not making that framework our own. It's actually making our own from that framework, and like, what is it? And I think that's the human story. It's like anyone can relate to that, whether leave Judaism, Christianity, Buddhism, Hinduism, a sect of Christianity, Christian Scientists, whether you're Pentecostal or Catholic, whether you're agnostic, atheistic, whatever framework. It's like, no, our job is awakening to the divine and sovereignty. And man, that's a beautiful place. And like you're saying, in the presence of love, unconditional and infinite love of God, in the presence of God, in the presence of source, whatever, it's like the healing's a byproduct. And it's like, that happens because you're just in the presence. Like you go to Starbucks, you smell like Starbucks, not because you went there for the scent, you went there for whatever you sought, but then you leave, you're like, I still kind of smell like Starbucks. Well, that's kind of same thing of like healing, but that's a byproduct of being in the presence of God or being in the presence of love. And
100%.
yeah, that's a beautiful story. Thanks for sharing that, brother.
Yeah, and I feel like there's a lot of shame. There's a lot of religious shame that comes along with like you're either right or you're wrong. I've obviously heard of a lot of people talk about Catholic shame and that sort of thing. I think Christian Science, again, although I don't necessarily practice it anymore, there's still a lot of things that are ingrained in me as my kind of like core philosophy. But I'd say that the one thing that I really I've always enjoyed is that we were raised to believe that, unlike most Christian faiths, with Christian Science, the whole thought was like you were born perfect in the image and likeness of God.
Mm-hmm.
That very first chapter of Genesis, like that's where it's the second chapter of Genesis about Adam and Eve that starts more or less the parable. The Christian scientists don't believe that that's absolute truth of the beginning of man, but more of a story of how Jesus taught as well, was a lot of times just through story, not necessarily through facts per se. And so the fact that we are born perfect in the image and likeness of God means that's more or less what this human experience is about, is to keep elevating yourself to where you're getting closer and closer and you're shedding off the human limitations, right? Human beliefs, and I love that idea regardless, because I think it still is pertinent to what we're doing. And the idea to kind of infuse, to me, it's hard to think about coming out of the womb and just from before you can remember, start being taught that you are sinner, that you are less than. Like, I feel like that is the human dream that we're steeped in. And that's the hardest thing to break free of, is like, no, you're not broken.
Right.
No, you don't need to be fixed. Like, man, you are enough. And just by actually being bold and having faith and taking, big leaps, do you actually start to, like I said, trials are proofs of God's care. It's just more and more proof that, like, man, I can do that. And then you believe more in yourself and you take more action, right? And so I feel like that's just a big part of why I'm probably led to do what I do, because that's kind of how I was raised, So it is interesting that you bring that up at the very beginning.
I'm so glad we're talking about this, because first of all, there's not a verse in the Bible that says there's original sin. There's that where the doctrine of original sin comes from is when David says, in iniquity did my mother conceive me. And David's mother's never mentioned in the Bible. And I believe David's mother is not the mother of the brothers of David. And that's why he wasn't with the brothers when they were fighting the Philistines, that he was in the field, because he wasn't counted with the brothers. So Rome took that one verse, in iniquity did my mother conceive me, and created this whole doctrine of original sin, that we're born sinners. And then if you're born sinner, the only solution is Rome's answer, which is, this submission to be a good Roman, and you can live in Rome.
Yeah.
Don't fit our Roman doctrine. Sorry, out of Rome, and you can live with the barbarians. And by the way, we're going to conquer the barbarian land. Yeah. So you're pretty much screwed. We're coming for you. And what I share with people all the time, like I did this podcast in January, of 2020, titled Why I Left Christianity to Find the Love of God. And I was a Christian preacher. I ran my own ministry called Roll Call Ministries. I was on staff at Young Life. I was interned at churches. I've done a whole bunch of different things in that Christian path. But it's the verse you talk about, Genesis. Here, Adam and Eve, they eat of the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil. They see that they're naked. They hide themselves. Like, we've heard that story a gazillion times. What we don't hear, what's not taught, is Genesis chapter 3, verse 8. And it says, and they heard the voice of the Lord God walking in the garden in the cool of the day. Tell me where there's anger in that verse. Tell me where there's wrath or judgment or smiting or whatever narrative you want to use. Zero. God says, hey, what's up? Where are you? Knowing where they were. And Adam says, I heard your voice. I was afraid and I hid myself because I was naked. Oh, yeah. Who told you you're naked? Did you eat of the tree where I ever command you not to eat of? Like, knowing already what they did, not even angry with them.
Yeah.
Not upset with them, not angry with them, not judging them, actually inviting them back into, like, you do not have to be ashamed. Why don't you come out here? I love you. You heard my voice in the garden in the cool of the day. This thing is a beautiful, glorious playground I've created for you. Come back out. But what happens is When he asked Adam that, Adam blamed. And Adam said, the woman. So God goes to the woman. He says, what did you do? She says, the serpent. And that is the crux. It's not about, and you and I you went through MITT, I went through ALA, like this narrative. That is the whole crux, not the sin, but the acknowledgement of like, yeah, I'm here. Like, I get chills right now just hearing your story and so many other people living in the shackles of shame, which is such a lie. The lie is the shame. The truth is the love and the invitation to come back into this presence. And sin just means, it's an archery term from the Middle Ages, means to miss the mark.
Missing the mark. Yep.
Did you miss the mark? Yeah. And you know what the worst thing is to say, oh, my missed mark. Actually, I was aiming there. Was the target. Okay, bro. Like, okay, gotcha. You know, like we all know people like that.
Yeah.
But to have the humility to say, yeah, I missed it. And what's the mark? It's walking in unconditional love. That's all. It's like, dude, God, the invitation is come back into love, not being forced out into utter darkness or whatever. So
completely. Anyway. Well, and I think about too, I mean, obviously you've got kids. I don't have kids yet. So many of my friends, my siblings do. I've got so many nieces and nephews. I think it's interesting to be at that stage in our life when, you know, I've heard from so many of my friends and family that like the love for your spouse is something, don't get me wrong, that's nothing can compare to that. But then also the love for your children, like, you don't know, it's like you can't even fathom how much you can love, right? To think about where that comes from. Like that doesn't come from you or a sibling or one of my, like that has to be coming from, I firmly believe that has to be coming from some type of divine source. Right. And if that is like, even just like a glimmer of how much love, you know, and people who take, you know, again, mushrooms, all stuff, their experiences are of like mind-blowing love. Right.
Yes.
But then I feel like there's also still so much doctrine that says like, you know, the wrath of God. And like, I just don't see, like, cause I've seen documentaries of people, the parents who, you know, have a serial killer rapist son, you know, and they're like, we hate what he's done, but we still love him unconditionally. Like the love of parents couldn't be anything but unconditional love, you know, unless they're in massive pain themselves. Right.
That's right.
So I feel like if that's the case, when that's coming from God, there's no way that God can be, on one hand, unconditionally loving and then conditionally loving as, like, you can't have it one or the other way.
Right. That's right.
So I just feel like that is ultimately the solution and to everything in life, you know. But it still always comes back to loving yourself first and foremost, and from there loving others and being able to, I mean, that's the legacy that I ultimately want to leave, you know.
Yeah.
And I think we're all better off if we focus on that, you know.
Yeah.
But it's very easy to get distracted.
Right.
Obviously.
Right.
So
you mentioned a couple of things I want to go back to in your story. I think it's powerful. First one is, when did you realize there was a lack of male presence in your life? Like at what point were you conscious of what is being a man look like? Is that a junior high? Is that puberty? Is that middle school?
I can go back and recollect moments that I was like, oh yeah, that would have been nice. You know, like no one told me about masterbation. No one told, like I literally stumbled into these things and felt shame about it.
Yes.
You know,
dude, I watched something about Mary. I'm 8 years old and I was like, what? Dude, I have such a crazy story. You know, people like, totally. Yeah. Right? I relate to it. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that was, I mean, there's those type of things. And, but I don't think I ever, again, I don't remember consciously being like, come to the emotional awareness of like, oh, I've got like the fact that dad's not there. I certainly saw that like, oh, that'd be nice to have that experience, as I saw, you know, my buddy and his siblings play with their mom and dad out and about, you know. I'm like, well, I'd never had that, you know. My parents were too overweight to even think about like running around the yard with us, you know. So their story, again, once it came out, made so much more sense. You know, that my dad's gay, my mom knew about it. So no wonder, like, they kind of settled for the breadcrumbs of connection via raising children, eating food, and traveling. Like that's the thing that they all like, that's it, right? That they had in common. And my dad was running from his own demons, distracting himself through being a workaholic. And my mom was probably doing the same thing by being a momaholic, right? So there was actually a lot of dysfunction there that I just wasn't fully aware of. So I don't think I really, really consciously came to the awareness of it until I started doing some personal development work, with Tony Robbins in 2009, I started to really, and then really got into it through MITT. I'm like, oh shit. Right. Okay. This is a deep rabbit hole.
That's a real oh shit one.
Yeah. So not till I was like 30-ish, in my 30s. Yeah. So
what about, here you are, view of searching for masculinity, and obviously this is a hindsight question, and then your dad comes out as gay. Like, what did that do for your view of him? Did he make more sense to you? What did it do to your view of yourself and just what it meant to be a man?
I shamed him in my mind, or at least to other people, never to his face. I don't feel like I ever really had much of a conversation. I don't feel like he knew me, or I just was a child of his, until he came out. So he came out when I was 28, 29. And I provoked him coming out because I was so angry at him that I had called my older sister being like, you know what? Again, she was kind of like the other parent. She was like my mom, it's like, screw him. And I used the word divorce. I'm like, I'm divorcing myself a dad. I don't want any more relationship with him. So she called him and put major pressure on him and be like, hey, and by the way, not only is Johnny pissed, I'm pissed. The rest of the siblings are pissed. Like, where have you been since mom passed away? We didn't know that he was literally kind of, grieving of his best friend, who was my mom, passing away. But then he was also deciding, should he keep living the lie, or is he going to come out? So he was off traveling the world a fair amount because he had been by my mom's side for a while. So that pressure kind of forced him to be like, well, this is really what I got going on, and when he told me, he told her that, my sister, that night, and she called me back. It's like, hey, dad wants to meet with you in his office tomorrow, and don't do anything rash until you hear him out. I was like, what? So the next day he brought me in. He's like, your sister tells me that you have something you want to get off your chest. I was like, really? Like, hell yeah. So I took an hour and a half, man. I took an hour and a half, and it was the first time to actually have his genuine presence, where he wasn't, distracted by his computer, his crackberry, as I called it then, anything going on with his business. He literally sat there and looked at me and gave me his full undivided attention, which was weird, to have it for the first time in my life. Yeah. But then I took the opportunity and I ripped him a new one with all my grievances for 28, 29 years of my life. Yeah. And then of course felt horrible about it when he then turns around and says, well, okay, now that you're done, right? And I was like, yeah, that's all I got to say. That's all. An hour and a half later, I said, well, long story short, he's like, I'm gay. And it was in that moment that I felt like my heart healed in many regards. And like its capacity for feeling empathy grew 100-fold, because I had all of this anger and all of these stories built around why my dad didn't love me and why he was cared more about money and success and the Rolex and the car and this and that than he did about us. When he actually came out, there's so many of these like things that those disappeared like that, and the truth kind of started connecting. Like, oh, no wonder they had the relationship, and no wonder he, like, thank God I don't even have to question my sexuality. But here's a guy that's been not only not necessarily questioning it because he knew he was, but then like having to lie every day. And that would talk about being out of integrity. That'll tear you up, but to feel like you can't, because at least in the times that he was growing up, there were people being killed or hung, in the 50s, 60s, 70s,
or even shut off from their families,
100%.
Yeah.
100%. So I think that was his greatest fear when he came out and he just started crying. He couldn't get it out. He finally uttered the words, "I'm gay." And I was like, oh, oh gosh, I thought you were going to tell me that you're dying of cancer as well, like mom. I was like, that's it. Again, not to say like,
Yeah.
oh, that's it. Like that's a big fucking deal. But
Right.
to me as a son, I was like, oh, like
Yeah.
that doesn't change anything about you for me.
Right. Right.
And if anything, that really healed my heart. And I was like, Dad, I love you. I told him the same thing, more or less what I would want to hear too from a father. It's like, Dad, I love you unconditionally, and who you sleep with is your business. That's none of mine. Like your dad, regardless. And that changed the trajectory of our life. I ultimately ended up at one point was living with him part time and his partner for like 2 or 3 years, and it allowed us to have time just to sit around the kitchen and talk about like, well, while we're at it, like I made up a story about this. Yeah. Did this really happen? He'd be like, hell no, it happened like this and this and this. I was like, oh my gosh. So I unpacked so much stuff with the help of my dad, which is so great,
Wow.
Compared to unpacking stuff about, your other parent who might be deceased or, it's like, it's so important for us to do like the unpacking of childhood trauma,
Yeah.
potentially with parents. And I know you've talked about that a lot too, but it's like, that's a big part of the healing journey for me that allowed me to start saying, okay, well, my dad clearly didn't have the tools, or he did the best he could with what he had. But given that was around the time I was like, okay, well, I don't have to unlearn a ton of stuff because gratefully, he didn't abuse me like he was abused, or he didn't, didn't impact me. It just was more or less like a clean slate. So starting around 29, 30, especially after the ex-wife left, I was like, okay,
wow,
fresh start. What type of man do I actually want to become? So I started to intentionally choose it and starting to write it into my soul. But it was hard, a lot more difficult, but it's probably just as difficult to unwrite things that we're raised with, right?
Yeah.
Especially if we have a bad father figure.
Yeah.
I was at least blessed with a neutral. I mean, there's some bad there, but only because of the shit that I made up in my head. But other than that, he provided for us but wasn't emotionally there. But now in the last 12, 13 years, he and I are super tight. We talk almost on a daily basis, and he's done a lot of work, went to MITT and Tony and Dr. Dispenza and like so much stuff that we can actually have conversations that I never thought would be possible in terms of, I just really thought that he was very shallow, that he was like only focused on money and that's it. But like the dude's capacity for, the ability to kind of connect on a deeper, emotionally intelligent capacity is so much bigger than I even ever gave him credit for. So he in turn came to respect me, and I in turn came to respect him. So that has helped me a lot to get a lot of that trauma or a lot of the pain out of the way, so that I can actually then focus on the runway of gaining momentum towards the man that I want to become. So,
brother, you're a beautiful soul, man. You are. You're just a beautiful soul. And that's what a fascinating story, that your perception of his shallowness was his own ability to control the lie. And you could only go that deep.
Yeah.
He could only allow himself to go that deep, because if you pierce that veil, then the whole thing falls apart. And I'm really happy, and I honor him, and what a beautiful thing that he found the courage to tell the truth.
Amen.
Because some people just won't, and they choose to continue whatever chaos and lies. And truth, for me, growing up the way I grew up, and trying to get the truth, and it continually being spun, it's like the truth matters more than anything. I ask guys when I coach clients or when I do men's retreats, one of the questions is, what would you crawl bloody knuckled over a broken field of glass to accomplish? Like, what would you give everything for? And for me, it's truth. I will turn on anything if I'm not held to any. I want truth. I want to be free, and I want to walk in love. And so I want you to know I honor your father, and that I honor you, brother. That's a tremendous, and what a cool gift that you got to unleash on him, because at MITT you get to unleash on the memory, but you got that opportunity to let it rip. That's really cool.
Yeah. What's interesting though at MITT, when it came to like the letting it rip on your mom and dad part, like I had actually done a lot of that. There wasn't a whole lot of energy there. I was like, actually, like I love my mom and my dad, and I've gotten a lot of that stuff out. It was interesting to see that the thing that I got rageful about was actually my own disappointment and anger towards myself.
Hmm.
And that's to this day, that's probably the hardest part, is just my own disappointment in myself and being so hard on myself. So it's just like, okay, if I can forgive my father, if I can forgive my mom, if I can, like, that is, I think, the bigger challenge at hand is sometimes it is really easy to love others,
Yeah.
and really easy to give them empathy and, but then when it comes to ourselves, it's like so difficult at times,
Yeah, brother, I get it. I mean, I think when you and I first talked, did I tell you that I almost took my life in October? I drove up to the top of the mountain and the Snoqualmie Pass up here, because it was like the last thing that I was doing really well. It's not like I wasn't spiritually growing and doing podcasts, but my wife asked me one thing, and it was like a nuclear tipped arrow that just penetrated. And I couldn't consciously, this is why plant medicine has been a huge healing, massively healing in my life. Even getting rid of the stigma of what people think of it, like even talking about it now, because it is a truth for me. It has been a powerful healing, because it allowed me to feel safe to process these memories that they weren't manufactured. But my wife, I can't consciously bring up pain. It's like you can't break your own arm. You can't. We don't have that. That's not a natural thing to hurt oneself like that deep. And so this thing my wife asked me, dude, it was like, it was the last thing. But I understand. I bring this up is I wanted to love myself, but I really hated myself. I hated my body. I hated every time I peed, every time I went to the bathroom, every time I showered, every time, like, and all that hatred manifested in my body, which is self-fulfilling thing. And it never could, and so it's been a beautiful journey of speaking love over myself and speaking, because words are so, how did God create? Is created with the words, and those words. And this is one of the things I've learned. The karmic law is immediate and it is omni and ever present. So when we say it comes immediately. So when someone says, I'm stupid, or I'm this, like it immediately creates what we say. And that's why our words are so important to, like, what we say, how we say it, why we say what we say.
100%.
Man, brother. So,
but cool too, though, that again, that you were given the gift of your wife to know you so well.
Yes.
To be able to pierce through your pierceless, armor.
Yeah.
To actually create that. It's touch and go there, I'm sure, but like that's what needed to happen to transform you, and I think that's why I think coaching is so valuable, because the better and better coaches there are, the greater the questions they have to really open you up,
That's right.
And to get to the things that you don't necessarily want to talk about, or that you don't even know need to be addressed.
You don't even know. Right? That was the thing. It was like, and I don't mean to make this about me and talk about
it's good
story, but I equate it like the Great Pyramid in Giza. Like, I had cleared out everything except this pyramid, and the truth I was hiding subconsciously, not consciously hiding, but subconsciously, was in the king's chamber in that Great Pyramid. So everyone came and like, wow, this is cleared out. Like, this is beautiful. Oh, look at this pyramid, a monument of the clearing. No, actually a great protective, like, structure to protect the king's chamber. And my wife was like, oh yeah, this is like traveled in and I'm so glad she did. And she didn't love it was, but facing, that's why courage, I talk a lot about courage, and I have a lot of content about courage. It's sad that it's not talked about. It's not even taught. Like, courage is everything. The courage to face, the courage of your father. That's why I honor him. Like, the courage to say the truth takes courage.
Well, while you're saying that, what comes to me is, like, courage is founded in truth. Like, you don't have the courage unless you have some belief that it's worth doing. What you're doing in the face of fear. You're almost believing that courage backed by truth is going to actually blast through the the false evidence that appears real in front of you, right?
Yeah. Yeah. That's good.
I
That's
don't know.
really good.
Yeah.
Man. So so you go from, your mom passing, your dad comes out as gay, which heals a lot of things. You're married, your wife leaves. Is that at that crux when you go to Tony Robbins, when you start looking outside of the faith that you had come from?
Yeah. Ultimately, she gave me a ticket to see Tony for the first time as our 2nd-year anniversary. So we only made it 2.5 years before the marriage was over. But yeah, I think that's probably one of the greatest gifts that I could have gotten out of the whole thing. And to go back to what we were talking about, when she decided to move on, don't get me wrong, I was apathetic in the marriage. I was passionless. I was not driven. Like I said it multiple times before, but I told her when I was like, she wanted to leave and I was resistant to it, of course, because I was like, no, we can do this. Like divorce wasn't even a word in my vocabulary. But when I started really thinking about like, is this best for her? You know,
Yeah.
do I love her enough to be willing to let her go? As cliche as that is, I really had to check in with my heart and be like, if it's meant to be, it'll be,
Yeah.
like maybe we'll reconcile, who knows, or whatever I was thinking at the time. But I was really feeling like the greatest gift was, excuse me, after she moved on, like, we had some interactions. We were sharing the dog for 1.5 years. It's like kind of you're uncoupling
Yeah.
the enmeshment and the codependency, which sometimes takes some time.
Right.
But that I, for several years there, still loved that woman unconditionally. Like there was nothing she could say, and she said some things that were not great.
Yeah.
Out of her own pain, which I totally respect or I understand. And just was like, oh my gosh, I've never actually truly felt unconditional love towards anything or anyone until now,
Wow.
So that was the greatest, one of the greatest gifts as well from that marriage was like, okay, even though she doesn't want anything to do with me and she sounds like she hates my guts, like, I guess it doesn't matter because I, unconditionally love that woman. So that allowed me to think, okay, that's possible, and that's what I want to feel, and that's what I've been looking for in a future relationship. So yeah, that was pretty powerful. But that got me into Tony Robbins, and then I went 6 months later because I loved it so much. I enrolled 3 people, so I got myself a free ticket because I wanted to go again.
That's
and
awesome.
It was coming home from that second Tony Robbins event that she picked me up from the airport, and she said it was over. So without that education, man, or just like that would have been even worse. Or I mean, it still was the worst year of my life, but I don't know if I would have made it through, quite frankly, if I didn't have the gift of the things that I kind of got into with Tony Robbins. So yeah, that started the journey.
Yeah, that is so cool. Because I'm very similar. So when I was 36, no, I'm sorry. When I was 34, I started going to therapy, and that's when I started having flashbacks, all this stuff from 34 to 36. But then I get invited to a Tony Robbins event, and he came to Seattle. It was the first time he'd come to Seattle in like 20 years. Wow. I wish he was here more, but I ended up being front row. And dude, it was so random. Like I'm like front row with a buddy, and I had grown up in the Christian world with like guided meditations or evil, like imagination is like where demons can infiltrate, and you got to be very like, it was like very fear-based, anything to do with anything was like, you're going to die, like pretty much it. And so I went to that, and it was the first time I'd ever gone through a guided meditation in a stadium, an arena full of people. And it was so powerful. And he is a gift. He really is. And that opened me up to, then I go to ALA, and that work, there's nothing like that work in the entire world. It's just because I've done landmark. I did last year, and landmark's good, but I would only say landmark comes after you go through the experiential
Mm-hmm.
thing. Like the cerebral thought based stuff, like that's good, but you got to heal the emotional side of yourself, you know, and
Completely.
that's been my journey. So yeah, Tony Robbins led us both down this path of healing, and that's really
Right.
cool.
Well, you know, he talks about like for a while, because I've done 5 UPWs, right? So the first several, I'm like, why are we cheering? Why does he have us cheering all the time? Because it gets old and you're like, oh God, I'm exhausted. Like, why are we just fake cheering, right?
Yeah.
But his whole point, obviously, being that the majority of all of our woundings and the majority of all our greatest, you know, memories all come in peaks, high intense, you know, positive and negative emotional states, right?
Yeah.
Everything else, like day to day, I don't remember what I did last 2 Thursdays ago. I don't,
Right.
you know, but if I were in a car crash 2 Thursdays ago, I'd remember it for sure, right?
Yeah, that's right.
So the whole point is like anchoring those, you know, rewirings of the neurons in your head to high, you know, peak states of ecstasy and joy. So I'm like, okay, that makes sense. But then I agree. I went to the forum and it was very heady.
Yeah.
It was good, like profound, sure, but it wasn't like moving. And then you go to MITT where you get experiential stuff where you're actually doing, and Tony has a little bit of it, but because he's so big, you can't facilitate some of that stuff until you go to like Leadership Academy when there's hundreds of us versus thousands of us, right? The same thing with MITT. I do feel like if anyone's listening to this, whether it be MITT, ALA, right? PSI here in town, like there's those type of things where, and when we say experiential, how would you define experiential for someone who doesn't know what we're talking about?
How would I? Going through exercises that emotionally recreate the most traumatic moments in a safe space so that you can reclaim your power when you had none. That's how I say it. Like, and you know, I shared this with you when we first talked. It was the very first time in my life that I had ever experienced unconditional love. Ever. And I mean, I've been running ministry. I mean, being in church, I can't tell you the level of like the house that I come from, the family structure that I come from my mom's side and dad's side is religious, deep, entrenched, evangelical and Catholic. And it is so entrenched. And I was trying to find the truth within all this stuff and like, just went hard down this path, but it was all conditional, like you were saying. And then finally, when someone said, like Strassner's like, that's what else? And I had already let it effing rip. He's like, what else? And I said the things that I had never uttered out of my mouth, but it was always with me. And when I said it, I could breathe air for the very first time in my life. Like I had lived under water my entire life until those moments. And that's when I realized, man, where love is present, all we need to do is be loving and hold space, because when love is present, people will share their truth. And when they share their truth, they'll be free.
Totally.
It's as simple as that. It's like we keep judging people. They're going to feel shame. They're going to hide their truth. They're going to stay in their bondage. We're going to stay in ours. Like, but in that space of love, it's like, and you know what's interesting? Actually, I'm thinking of you and your dad. It's such a vivid story you told. It's like perhaps your dad felt enough love that you cared in the anger, that he has apathy to you, but he equated that emotion perhaps of love. Like you don't get angry at something you don't care about. We're indifferent. Right. So hate is not the opposite of love. Hate is love misplaced with anger. Indifference is the opposite of love. It's like, I can give a rip, you live or die. I don't care. But when we're angry and that visceral, like volcanic, like it's because I love you, like fucking wake the fuck up. Like, you know? And your dad felt that love and he told the truth, and look what the results are. So it's beautiful.
Yeah. It was definitely a pretty powerful moment. That's for sure. Well, and what I feel like where this is going, because we're gonna like podcast switch. I think it's almost good that we just keep rolling, and it's like we can just keep going back and forth and interviewing each other. Because as you're talking about, my experience, and it makes me curious about, because you talk about your own stuff going on with your dad. Like how much, if you don't mind me asking, if you don't mind going into a little bit, like how much, unless you want to cut it and we can flip the script.
No, we can keep going. Let's switch over to yours. That's fine. And we can go into it or whatever. Yeah. Or we just keep rolling. You keep rolling.
Let's why don't we do that? Why don't we just wrap up yours and we'll switch over to mine, and we can. But for anyone who's listening and wants to go and hear, like, well, I want to hear what Lucas's story is. Well, then come over to the Johnny King show.
That's right. That's right.
There you go. Any other thoughts? Because we're going to keep going about all this stuff. But
well, I just want to say thank you. Thanks for coming on, and thanks for doing what you're doing, and because everyone gets to, I would love it if everyone goes to your page, follows you, and sees what you're doing, because you're doing important work. And the beauty of this podcast is to show that we're all human. We're all on this journey together, and being a coach is intentionally doing the work and then helping other people that step behind. It's not a step below, it's a step behind. Just like, here's the step, keep going. And, so where can people find you and connect with you?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think if they just go to johnnyking.com, they can find a lot of their answers there. And they can find me at Johnny King on Instagram and facebook.com/Johnny King Coaching. But you're absolutely right. It's like, have I figured all my stuff out? Hell no. Will I ever? Probably not. I don't. But if anyone who's listening, resonates with you or resonates with me or neither, just like there's someone out there that can help you through the process of working through your own trauma, because we're coming from both two different sides of the spectrum. Like I didn't have any physical or emotional abuse really, but I still was majorly wounded, still working through stuff from even the absence of that. Right. That it's not about comparison. If anyone's really listening to this, it's actually just about finding answers and finding that unconditional loving support to work you through the healing, right? That love heals. So, but that's where people can find me. JohnnyKing.com is probably the best place to find connection. Yeah.
Awesome, brother. Thank you. Thank you.
Amen. I'm looking forward to continuing.
Brother Johnny, thank you. Thank you for coming back on, or for coming on the show back on, because I just recorded with you. But thanks for coming on and holding space and sharing that journey. And I'm so happy to hear where you are and where you're headed. And every single person, my dear brother and sister, blessings to you. Blessings. Receive the blessing. Receive this blessing. I bless you. Receive that. You are loved. You are light. You are beautiful beyond measure, beyond words. Male, female, strong, weak, whatever you perceive yourself to be, you are loved beyond measure. And I bless you all. Thank you so much for listening. I am Lucas Mack. This is the Golden Rule Revolution, and I'll talk to you on the next episode. Thank you, brothers and sisters, for listening. For support in your journey, go to my website, lucasmack.com.